Hey guys, it's me, Brett again, and while Willie is off at the hockey game tonight, I figured I'd make another one of these little videos. Unfortunately, this video isn't going to be quite as happy as the last one. The other thing Student Senate is going to be voting on this week is a resolution regarding Professor Edward Larkin of the German department. Professor Edward Larkin pled guilty to indecent exposure after his sexually criminal behavior in January of 2009, which involved the public exposure of his genitals to a 17-year-old girl and her mother. And I believe that was off campus. It was not anywhere on campus. The university, I believe, tried to have him fired at that point, but there was a conflict with his contract as he is tenured, and they brought an arbiter who found that they in fact could not fire him. He has been on a suspension for the last 3 years where he has been doing office duties and has not been in contact with students, and he is set to begin teaching again in the fall of 2012. During the arbitration process, or sometime after, 2 experts deemed him to be suffering from a sexually compulsive disorder that was worsened by a low-grade chronic depression. So what the Student Senate is voting on in this resolution is basically calling on him to resign from the university, and further going on to resolve that we as the Student Senate are adamantly opposed to his employment at any educational facility now or in the future. So let me know what you guys think of that. I'm going to read the bill off right after this, and I highly encourage you guys to actually listen through the actual text of this bill, because the text of it is important. It's not just its meaning, it kind of adds a bit to it. So one thing I want to make sure that I kind of make clear before I read off the actual text is that even if we pass this resolution, we can't force him to leave. We're simply passing a resolution in which we express that we feel he should resign, but in the end it would be his decision. Either way, however you guys feel about this, please come and talk to me or talk to Willie. Just find one of us, we're around, or come to Hall Council, or tell someone else on Hall Council so they can tell us. This is a really important issue, and we want your feedback on this. So, awesome. So, the text of this bill reads as follows. Whereas Professor Edward Larkin has pled guilty to indecent exposure after his sexually criminal behavior on July 19, 2009, which involved the public exposure of his genitals to a 17-year-old girl and her mother, and whereas the American Association of University Professors, AAUP, arbitration process that allowed Professor Larkin to continue working at the University of New Hampshire after this incident was based on wording from a contract that had been written in 1984, and whereas Professor Larkin will be returning to his teaching responsibilities after his 3-year suspension from contact with students in 2012, and whereas Professor Larkin was evaluated and confirmed to have mental instability in the form of a sexually compulsive disorder and chronic depression, mental instabilities that, like all other psychological imbalances, have a high probability of recurrence when the individual is placed under stress, and whereas teaching students could put a high amount of stress on Professor Larkin because he is returning to a student body that advocated for his removal, and whereas students may decline to take his class based on his criminal activity, and whereas students at the University of New Hampshire have a right to be taught by psychologically healthy, mentally stable professors who are not a potential threat, and whereas the University of New Hampshire has a right to possess psychologically balanced professors who can perform to their maximum capabilities in this current hiring freeze and budget crisis, and whereas the slightest chance of a recurrence is completely unacceptable, and whereas the University of New Hampshire's reputation was significantly tarnished by this event, and whereas incidents of this nature incite a negative reaction from those who fund the university, i.e. state, alumni, and private donors, which in turn may lower our funding even further, and whereas Governor John Lynch, University President Mark Huddleston, and many students and professors have called for his resignation, And whereas, the fact that any student who performed the same action would be subject to residential expulsion at minimum, suspension, and possibly expulsion from the university in addition to informal actions. And whereas, professors have an obligation to be morally upstanding and ethical, even more so than students. And whereas, Professor Larkin's continued employment has served as a testament to our struggling synergy between the UNH administration and the professors may create disastrous situations. And whereas, Professor Larkin's presence may be a negative influence upon the students, staff, and the university as a whole from a legal, moral, ethical, and various other standpoints. Therefore, be it resolved by the Student Senate of the University of New Hampshire to call upon Professor Edward Larkin to immediately resign from his employment at the University of New Hampshire, and be it further resolved by the Student Senate of the University of New Hampshire to communicate to Professor Larkin our adamant opposition to his continued employment at the University of New Hampshire or at any other educational facility in the present and future.